Hey, what's up? It's Kit time for another video. Today, man, it's I've been trying to start this. I've actually made videos already, uploaded even. But, you know, I wanted to do a good job explaining this whole thing because it's critical. Mostly because you're using big stuff, and when you're using big stuff, big fish tend to get attracted, and if you make an error there, you lost a big one. Okay, and I wanted to explain carefully, especially since this segment is for the big stuff. Okay, so earlier today I had to take my wife to the airport, get some blood work done for my visa renewal, and then on the way home we passed through like this urban area, and I told my daughter, like, you know what, I think I'm gonna go to the port area and I'm gonna film, like, me working some jigs, because that's a request from some people, and I think it's also useful to have something like that. So she said, like, okay, do you want me to help you out? I was like, yeah, 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 because we're gonna have to focus on what's being done with the rod, with the manipulation of the rod and the reel and stuff. And then I go, like, I'm gonna scale things up, because when you scale things up, obviously things become very visible. So if I'm using a big reel and I'm moving the jig and I'm showing you that I'm moving it like that, you'd be able to see it, rather than actually having a small rod and reel and then you see the motions, and especially on video, you don't really capture it. So that kind of how the plan was. Unfortunately, when we reached the desert area, uh, I saw that there was a lot of sand on the road, and that only happens in high winds. Because in the desert area, obviously the wind passes through, it carries out the sand, and then it moves. Now, when you're I've tried fishing in like high winds here. I'm telling you, it's not just the sand that's pelting you, there's also small rocks. And what happened before is that when I turned like that, there was a rock that actually hit my glasses. And good thing I had my glasses on, otherwise, yeah, that wouldn't have been pleasant at all. The rock actually made a nick on the glass. Glass, not plastic, glass. And that sucked. Good pair, too. So as you could imagine, um, I don't want to have that kind of headache. Plus, imagine you're fishing or you're in an open area at the port, and then you have sand blowing towards you and stuff, and you're breathing that thing. Not cool. So anyway, long story short, I said, like, okay, we might have to postpone it for another day. But then when I got home, I realized that I'm gonna have to put leaders on these things anyway. And then I said, like, hey, let's film that. But um, after doing that, okay, and I did it. After doing that, though, I had to delete the video. You know why? You're kind of stupid sitting there for 30 minutes, and you are actually just watching me, like, tying the knots and struggling, because this whole place isn't set up for tying FGs, or what do you call this, PRs. So I just said, like, hey, why am I gonna show this when they know what a PR is and they know what an FG is, right? And I have instructions of doing both in the channel already. So kind of doesn't make sense. So what I'm gonna do is actually explain why. Okay, because I believe that it's important. Now, a lot of people don't will not find the value of this, because they're already casting without this and they're doing fine. And you know what, this is one of those problems that you didn't think that you had, but it's there. Now, the problem is largely when you're tying braid, which is thin, to thicker leaders. Now, if you're sticking with thinner leaders, that's fine, because there's the transition between thin leaders and thin braid, not that bad. But when you're actually putting thick leaders on, like, take for example, you're using 80 on PE3, this becomes a bit more obvious. Now, this happens to you when you're actually fishing that even offshore. When you, like, take for example, when we're casting for tuna, I use a PE4 combo, and I put a leader that's a bit thick there. I would notice it compared to when the leaders are thin. Okay, so what happens is that when the braid and the leader passes through the guide, the connection, or the FGPR, whatever, not actually goes, and it slows everything down when it gets here. Then on the next guide, or even here, what happens is that it whips back and wraps. And when that happens, accidents happen. Okay, and sometimes it happens more than usual. Now, bigger guided rods, that's fine because it just kind of absorbs it. It's fine. However, it still happens. You know, even with the K guides where it's supposed to be anti-tangles and stuff, you just don't wait for those things to happen because, you know, I've seen guides broken because of that, especially the smaller stuff. I've seen some guys actually have the lures rebound and hit them. Uh, I've seen the guides pop and all of this. Now, if you're out in the field and you're fishing with one rod, and if that happens and something breaks, guess what? Your fishing trip's over. Now, it's even worse if you're overseas or somewhere, you know. So if you are encountering problems like that, then it's probably better to have something like this so that it helps you, right? More worry-free fishing. That's what it is. Now, this is nothing new. So if you're thinking that this is the best thing since sliced bread and the Japanese are the ones that actually invented this, you're wrong. It's not. For a really long time, surf fishermen have been using something called a shock leader. And what it is a very thick piece of mono that wraps around the reel spool at least 3 times, and you use this for casting. Well, why it's called a shock leader is because it is the part of the leader system or part of your line system that actually uh, uh, handles the shock of the sinker and the casting. Okay, so it's basically an intermediary that enables things to not break, right? To not break when you're casting. Now remember, when you are casting, the line hinges here. Okay, so it's either you have your main line, it hinges here, and guess what? That bit always compresses, always compresses. Okay, and that's damage. Okay, now if it's mono, this part also heats up because again, that's friction and that's force. And what happens is that after a while, if you're just using thin mono, that'll break, especially if you're keeping on like casting in the same distance, the same drop, and the pressure is always on that point. So I've done that. Accidents happen, as I say, and then before you know it, you know, you almost killed someone. In my case, so a shock leader is a very, very good way to not get in trouble. Okay, so as far as surf fishing is concerned, now imagine that some of these guys are actually using 8-ounce sinkers. Okay, 1 ounce is 28 grams. Do the math. So that's constantly something that they're using. Now, for our purposes, for shore jigging, what it is literally a transition leader. Okay, so it's known by many names. Okay, but what I call it is a transition leader because it helps your line transitions from the thick leader to your main line. Okay, so how do you compute for this? So very easy. Okay, so what I use is roughly 3 to 4 times the number of my line. So like, take for example, I'm using PE6 on this. PE6 is roughly what, 90 pounds. So times 2 would be 180, 200, something like that. So I would use 200. Okay, now my leader could be like 120, 100, and it's about, it transitions better like that. Okay, so if you have a thick leader here, and you have, in this case, this is 150. Okay, because it's what I had a lot of. So 150 braid, or in this case, this is actually assist hook cord. Okay, so 150 to 200 assist hook cord. The 200 is kind of thick for me, assist hook cord, so I took like 150. I took the core off, and what happens if you take the core off, it's that it becomes softer, A, and B, it collapses. So the diameter further kind of gets smaller. Now from, this is my leader here, my mono leader. I use mono more than fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon's kind of stiff. So when you're casting, it actually kind of impedes, especially since this is spinning. Now remember, it spirals. Okay, thick fluorocarbon, it'll create more friction, I believe. So I stick with mono. So 100, this is 100-pound mono, 150 thick braid, and for this particular one, again, it is assist cord. I take the core off, and then that makes this a bit easier to tie onto this, and it also gives it a smaller profile. That is just an FG. Okay, now you can use a PR, and you can use a short PR on this that won't slip, and tie it like super tight. Okay, and it'll hold. Now the reason why I do FG here is I also want to show you guys that you could do this on the field. The difference for me is that I don't like a long transition, because thicker braid would obviously will have more friction. So I use a thin or short section before my braid. This is PE6. Now PE6 is about 90. Okay, so a short FG, that's all it is there. Now for me, my transition is actually just 1 arm span and a half. Okay, because a lot of people do like a long piece of transition, and I honestly believe that there's no value in that. And just when you're casting, this short section just provides the transition from thick to thin. And I use a similar technique for fly fishing, wherein my leader actually has a that kind of what clued me in. It has a shorter butt section, and then I have a longer mid section, and that's how I tie, at least how I tie my leaders, and you know, kind of gave me an idea for this, to actually just make it a short transition. Now the soft braid, okay, transitions into like something stiffer. Okay, and that also kind of helps with this, having the diameters closer together. You get a reverse taper essentially, and when you're casting, that transition going out makes the cast smoother, and you won't have that hinging, you know, when it hits here. So basically it's like a big spiral that goes, and then this chokes it, and then when it hits the knot, the knot hits one side, and then it flips over and then turns. Oh boy, not pleasant at all. And what's worse is actually when it kind of, usually it happens either here or here, within the rod. Not cool. All right, so long and short of it is that. So I also have it on here. Okay, so I was going to be using that. Now, a little bit about spools. A smaller spool will retrieve less line, and then a bigger spool, which is this one, 16,000, will make the reel even faster. Now, the reason why I have those two there is because, and you could put like a 14,000 as well, because this is a 16,000. Okay, so it's basically uh, the rate of retrieve. Okay, so a smaller spool means that even if you have an XG, you can have the line uh, being brought in slower because it's a smaller spool, even if the reel is actually turning super fast. So the line will be retrieved. The line that's retrieved on a smaller spool will be less. Okay, now in this particular model of Stella, 8,000, 10, and 14 have the same body. It's just the size of the spool. Now for me, I have for 16,000 and then 8,000. It depends on what you want to do. Now this whole thing, the small increments actually help you. Okay, so like take for example, for if you're using fast jigs and you're using a smaller spool, your rate of retrieve will be different from when you're using a bigger spool, because guess what, more line is taken in, and if you're using a long slim fast jig, you want that to actually move. So what happens is that you have a small spool, it's going to be an advantage for you because you're giving it more time when you're pumping it and working the jig. You're actually giving it more time to be traveling horizontal. Now when you have a bigger spool, it takes up a lot of line, so before it actually, like take for example, I have one here. Okay, so this, if the potential travel for an 8,000 size spool would be like that. Okay, so let's say about an arm's not half an arm span, about a meter or so. So let's say from here it travels here. Okay, that's the, you know, it goes that, like that, like that. That's on an 8,000 spool. Now on a 16,000 spool, maybe shorter, like that. 14,000, maybe it'll be like this, you know, like that. 8,000, it's like that. Okay, so just in theory, not really like that, but yeah. So your rate of retrieve is something that gets dictated by the spool as well, not just XG, PG, HG, you know. So um, even if you're actually reeling at the same pace, okay, so a smaller spool will take up less line. And just a little bit of a note now, how important is that? Well, it depends on how the fish respond, and this is why you have these tools with you when you're fishing. Now, is it a good idea to actually have these things for smaller spools? Like take for example, um my twin power XD. Okay, I can put a 4,000 size spool on there or a 5,000 size spool. So this is one of those things, like little things that kind of matter. All right, so that's that. I hope that it was simple and straightforward and easy to understand. If you have questions, drop them in the comment section. Alrighty. I think that's it. I mean, very simple. There's again, this is not the only way to do this. There are more complicated methods, and I believe what I'm showing you guys is actually something that's fairly easy and everybody can do. Okay, so play around with the lengths if you want. You know, some people go with 8 meters and then they have 4 meters for their what do you call this, leader. That's all in good. If it works for you, great. But for me, the longer my transition leader is, the more it's going to affect the distance of my cast as well. So I keep it as short as I can. All right, so for me, I found that an arm span and a half, whatever the length is, because I you know, even 2 arm spans would probably be like, well, it's not going to be 8 meters, it's shorter. right? So play around with that, see exactly what works for you. For me, I've used this like for some time already, and I don't do a lot of the heavy stuff, okay? But in the times that I actually use this, it helped me out a lot. And it's been years, really, and I haven't looked back since. Now, even for my GT fishing, I use this because it just makes it cast better. Alrighty. Uh, I'd like to actually thank the members. Okay, always. Thank you very much for supporting me and supporting this channel. And if you want to do the same, memberships is the way to go. It supports me directly and it helps me create more of these videos for you guys. Alrighty, that's it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Class dismissed.